All right, who got messed up by the time change? All you gotta do is just use your smartphone as an alarm. It'll automatically change it for you. Just go to bed a little hour early. All right, let's dig in. 2 weeks ago, I shared a quote. We were talking about the serpent in Genesis chapter 3. And I quoted Kevin Spacey in the movie The Usual Suspects. And he's talking about the devil. That's the context. And he says this: nobody believed he was real. And that was his power. The greatest trick that the devil ever pulled was convincing the world that he didn't exist. And I shared that quote because in a lot of ways, I think it's true, like most people, or a lot of people, have struggled to believe in something called Satan or the devil or the accuser or the evil one. There's a lot of different names for him. That's hard for a lot of people who maybe are a little bit more like logical, rationally oriented to wrap their minds around. But what's interesting though, is I believe that to be true, but then also on the other hand, it's very fascinating. I don't know if you've noticed, but if you look out at modern American culture, there is a huge rise in spirituality. And people believing in the spiritual world. This is usually called like the New Age movement, New Age spirituality. And there's a lot of kind of manifestations of this. I think, I'm not saying this is New Age at all, but one example of people being open to the spiritual world or being fascinated by it, honestly would be like Halloween. And here's what I mean by that. It's so interesting to me. I grew up where like everyone would put Christmas lights up for Christmas. And maybe there was like one or two houses that would do Halloween. Now it is flip-flopped, at least for me, and I just live up the street in our neighborhood. There like 60% of people put up Halloween decor. And then maybe like 25% put up Christmas lights. It's just really interesting, and that's not a value or a judgment on Halloween or Christmas, whatever. I'm just saying it's an interesting cultural indication. That's it. And so people are open to spirituality, but people still, they get uncomfortable though, maybe talking about institutional religion, the church, or Jesus. But they'll believe in and talk about New Age spirituality stuff. It's very interesting. Hopefully you're following along with me. All of that to say, there was this article that came out in The Atlantic in 2018 called American Exorcism. And you can just Google this. It's a really interesting article. The bummer is that you'll have to subscribe, pay to see it. Let me just give you a cheat. I'll subscribe to this stuff so I can read their articles, and then I just cancel it within 2 weeks so I don't have to pay it. Anybody else? No, okay, I'm not alone. So here it is. This is the article, and the subtitle gives a summary of what it says. It's this. I'll read it for you. Priests, Catholic priests, are fielding more requests than ever for help with demonic possession. And a centuries-old practice, exorcism, is finding new footing in the modern world. And what's interesting about this is that, we as modern people, we don't believe in Satan and the demonic, but now what's happening in our culture is all of a sudden you're seeing a rise of that stuff. It's very interesting. In this same article, we'll put this up. Here's a quote from it. Polls conducted in recent decades by Gallup and the data firm YouGov, and those are like some of the most well-known kind of formal surveyors, suggest that roughly half of Americans believe demonic possession is real. And the percentage who believes in the devil is even higher, and in fact has been growing. Gallup polls show that the number rose from 55% in 1990 to 70% in 2007. So maybe it actually isn't all that weird or strange or irrational to believe in the devil after all, at least statistically speaking. It's actually quite popular now. But that pushes us to ask another question, which I think is related to demonic possession. And by the way, happy Sunday. How's that? Good morning. You lose an hour of sleep, and then the pastor talks about demonic possession. Whew. But if there is this cosmic, evil, powerful spiritual being that we call Satan, if that's true, and 70% of Americans say it is, are there others? Meaning, if we're willing to believe that there is at least one evil supernatural being, why couldn't there be others? And if that's true, then the question is, well, how did those others get here? You ever wondered this? So here's what I want to talk about this morning. Is there a biblical origin story to what we call demons? Is there a biblical origin story in the Bible that says, hey, here's how demons got here? I think there is. All right. Well, Louis thinks there is. So most people, when they read the Bible, and this is how I read the Bible for years, think that, the Bible just talks about a human rebellion, Genesis chapter 3, Adam and Eve, etc. And of course that is true. The Bible absolutely does talk about human rebellion, of course, the origin of sin. But we saw this 2 weeks ago. There's also an origin story of what we call Satan, the devil, the serpent. And that is actually right alongside, and in some ways related to the human rebellion story. In Genesis 3 is also the rebellion story of Satan. So there's at least one rebellion story in the Bible of what we call evil, cosmic, spiritual being at that point. Probably in just the last year or two. So this is a brand new journey to me. And one of the things I love about the Bible is that if you read the Bible faithfully, you will continue to learn new things. Like, I don't think you can ever master the Bible. Like, I think I'll get, hopefully into my 70s, 80s, 90s, whatever, and still be learning new things. And which actually makes you do this, then it makes you approach the Bible humbly and curiously. That you don't have a grasp of everything. You're always going to be learning, so you should always be open to new things. And for me, in the last year or two, I have changed on something, and that is that I no longer think that there is just one origin story of evil spiritual beings, Satan. I actually think there's two others. So we're going to put up a little quick graph here. I am under the impression now that there are 3 spiritual being rebellions in the scriptures, and they all happen in Genesis, and they all happen in the first 11 chapters, which is very interesting. Now, the first one we've already covered, that's the serpent in Genesis 3. That is the origin story of Satan. The second one, Genesis chapter 6, first couple of verses, is a lovely group of people called the Nephilim. And we have them in purple because that's what we're talking about this morning. That's the second rebellion story. The third one happens in Genesis 11, 1 through 9. It's actually the Tower of Babel, if you've heard of that. And we actually learn from the book of Deuteronomy kind of a deeper perspective on what happens there, and that's in Deuteronomy 32. And we learned there that there are these false gods of the nations. It's very interesting. They're also kind of mentioned in the book of Daniel. So, all that to say, in the first 11 chapters of Genesis, we are given 3 origin stories of evil spiritual beings. Now, 2 things to preface you with. 1, I'm only going to talk on the second one this morning. I don't have time to get into the third one. May or may not touch it in about a month from now when we get to chapter 11. And yes, we're actually going to get to chapter 11. It's amazing. I have, 30-ish minutes from here on out. And in those 30 minutes, it is impossible for me to cover everything about the Nephilim in chapter 6. So I acknowledge that ahead of time. And hopefully we can record a podcast in the next couple weeks and I can give you more detail on it, all right? So be looking for that, plan on doing it. If you are curious about this topic and you want to learn more, or you want to fact check me, please do. I recommend a Hebrew Bible scholar named Michael Heiser. And he's got a book out that's lay level called Supernatural, really good. So just go Michael Heiser, Supernatural, Amazon, boom, there is if you want more information. And then the last thing, I need to prepare you. Genesis 6, 1 through 4 is probably the strangest passage in the Bible. And I mean that literally. So just know it's gonna get weird, it's gonna get bizarre. I think our culture likes the bizarre. I mean, we just got addicted to a Netflix series years ago called Stranger Things. So, we're gonna talk about some Stranger Things this morning. So I just wanna get you ready. So buckle up, chapter 6, verse 1, here we go. If you need a Bible, page 4 in the orange one is underneath your chairs. Let me read the passage for us. When human beings began to increase in number on the earth, and daughters were born to them, so the human race is expanding. Verse 2, the sons of God saw that the daughters of humans were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. And then the Lord said, my spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth on those days. And oh, by the way, also afterward, you're talking about after the flood. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. These were the heroes of old, men of renown. And the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. All right. I can say with full honesty, I have never preached on this before, or I have actually never heard in person someone else preach on this before, about the Nephilim. Why? Because it's weird. And preachers don't want to deal with a very weird passage that's debatable. But yours truly is not doing that. We're going to get weird this morning. So as we dig into this passage, let me quote for you an Old Testament professor, John Goldingay. He actually taught at the seminary I went to. I think these are wise words as we go into this passage. He says this: I am wary of interpreting the Bible in a way designed to cause it to make total sense to me as a Western person, because I assume that my Western assumptions are sometimes wrong. As we go through this, I just want to encourage you. I can't control you, obviously, but I just encourage you to be open. And I want you to approach the Bible. I think you should always approach the Bible with humility and curiosity. Okay? Because every culture has a weakness to it. Now, I actually think cultures have strengths to them too, but every culture has a weakness, meaning our understanding of reality, our worldview, our perspective on life is going to have untrue things about it, okay? Like example, our culture believes that, you can buy happiness, money will make you happy. Well, in the end, that's actually not true, but American culture will tell you that, okay? It's a weakness of American culture. If the Bible is completely perfect and true, which we believe it is, it would be logical to expect it than to disagree with and bump up against assumptions of our culture. Meaning, we should expect the Bible to challenge our own framework because we aren't perfect and the Bible is. And if that's the case, there are going to be times where we disagree with each other. And so I'm just saying, be open, be humble, be curious. In other words, be skeptical. And if someone truly takes that serious, you should be skeptical about your own skepticism. You tracking with me? So like, I love how our culture, be skeptical of the Bible. Oh, okay, great. Well, be skeptical of your own skepticism then. Those with ears here. Now let's go to the deep end. We're gonna jump off from the diving board right now. 3 things you gotta know about this passage. 3 things to figure out. 1, what in the world? Who are these sons of gods that have sexual relations with human daughters that develop kids? Who are these sons of gods? Secondly, but related to that first question, these people called the Nephilim show up. And they're called heroes of old and men of renown. Like, how are they related to this? Like, how are the Nephilim related to these sons of gods who have sexual relations with these women and have children? Okay. And then all of that in mind, thirdly, apparently that whole plot line leads to extreme corruption and evil and wickedness just spreading like a virus all over the earth, which then leads God to then make a flood, wipe out the earth, right? So you heard about Noah and the flood. That comes right after this story. And that's actually really important to know that whatever this story is, it leads to corruption, wickedness, and evil spreading, which tells us something bad happens, okay? And we'll get to the flood in a couple weeks. So now let's answer these. First things first, who are these sons of God? Well, it just so happens that this phrase in Hebrew in the Old Testament, it's very clear how to translate it. Like, this isn't debatable. It just makes scholars nervous, though. But it's okay being nervous. That's what I'm talking about. It's okay to feel strange and bizarre about the Bible sometimes. Over and over again in the Old Testament, the phrase sons of God, it's very clear. It means supernatural beings. Spiritual, supernatural beings, basically what you and I call angels, okay? So the phrase sons of God means angels, okay? If you want to fact check me, go to Job 1:6, Job 2:1, Job 38:7, and Psalm 29:1. Go read them. So this passage is talking about the sons of gods who are these supernatural spiritual beings who have sexual relations with human daughters and thus produce these hybrid offspring. And I say hybrid because they're half angel and they're half human. Mom's human, so they're half human. Dad's an angel or whatever, and so they're half like him. So they're hybrid creatures. Very, very, very strange stuff, okay? Now, is the Bible just being weird just to be weird? I don't think so. I think there's a point to the weirdness. Do you remember? You probably don't. I wouldn't. But there is a particular way in Genesis chapter 3, Eve, we're told how she rebelled. Let's revisit that. So let's put up this next slide. And then I want you to notice the parallelism between Genesis 3:6 and Genesis 6:2. I cheated for you and we highlighted the words in yellow. Let's read it. When the woman, Eve, saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desirable to make one wise, she took some of its fruit and ate. This is the human rebellion story. Okay. Saw, good, took. Now let's go read Genesis 6:2 again. The sons of God saw that the daughters of mankind were, the literal word in Hebrew there is good. And they, thank you, Louie. We're in rhythm now. It's amazing. So every time I point at you, you need to give the answer. Louis, what's 100 divided by 23? 4.5. All right. So, do we see this? Here's the pattern. Saw, good, took. It's the exact same words in Hebrew. Genesis 3, human rebellion. The author is telling us the same thing is happening now inverted. The first one started with humans who rebelled because they saw something that was good and they took. And now you have these spiritual beings who see something that is good and they take. This is a rebellion story. And right away, we are taught that. We're to see that in its literary format. Here's the point. This is a rebellion of sons of God, supernatural, angel-like beings who are breaking God's appointed boundaries. Angels are angels for a reason. Humans are humans for a reason. They aren't to, just for a lack of a better phrase, not have sex together. But they break this boundary, this authority that God has put in place, and that leads to corruption, evil, and wickedness, which is why we read this next in verses 5-7. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on earth. Every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. I mean, this is a big statement to make right here. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on this earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Here comes the flood. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I've created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground. For I regret that I have made them. Like I said, we're going to look at that in 2 weeks from now. So here's what we have so far, because I want you to track with me. Supernatural beings who rebel against God by engaging in sexual relations with human daughters, which leads to evil spreading around like a virus. Now, if you don't believe me, that's okay. Let me show you confirmation of this interpretation twice in the New Testament. Let's take a quick detour. 2 Peter chapter 2. 2 Peter is all the way, we're gonna be in the back of the New Testament, just before the book of Revelation now. 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 4-10. Yeah, this is weird stuff. You won't read this in like your morning devotions with like a nice cup of coffee or something like that. Verse 4. I'm just imagining like these verses like painted on a nice thing in Hobby Lobby. You know what I mean? Gosh. For if God did not spare angels when they sinned. Interesting. Plural. Angels when they sinned. But sent them to hell, putting them in chains of darkness to be held for judgment. And now, notice what comes next. Because these are the clues that 2 Peter is talking about Genesis 6, 1-4. Because notice what he says next. These are all stories in Genesis that happen right after Genesis 6. If he did not spare the ancient world when he brought the flood on its ungodly people, but protected Noah, a preacher of righteousness, and 7 others, boom, here's another one. If he condemned the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, if you don't know that story, it's fine, but just know it happens in Genesis. Verse 7, we meet another character, Genesis. And if he rescued Lot, a righteous man who's distressed by the depraved conduct of the lawless, blah, 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 blah. Verse 10. This is especially true of those who follow the corrupt desires of the flesh and despise authority. So the sin there in all those examples is desiring the flesh and despising authority. Interesting. That sounds like what the angels did in chapter 6 with these human daughters. Maybe that's just a one-time thing though. Okay, let's go to Jude. Jude is so small, it just has one chapter. You don't even need to say that chapter. It's just verses 6-7, Jude. A book we never turn to. But here's one reason why we should. And the angels who did not keep their positions of authority, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment on the great day. And then, man, he gives us another clue, just like 2 Peter. In a similar way, Sodom and Gomorrah and the surrounding towns gave themselves, and if you don't know the Sodom and Gomorrah, it's a story about sexual immorality. What are we saying happened in Genesis 6? Angels committed sexual immorality. And then he says, sexual immorality and perversion. They serve as an example of those who suffered the punishment of eternal fire. So, there are two instances in the New Testament. Peter and Jude are looking back at Genesis 6 and they're describing the scene for us. And they're saying angels sinned against God because they left their realm and they broke authority by committing sexual immorality. It's a pretty black and white reading. So now what about the Nephilim? Because you thought this was weird so far, it gets more weird. We're just getting a little weird right now. All right, the Nephilim. Genesis 6, verse 4. The Nephilim, and isn't it interesting that he assumes that we know who the Nephilim are? We're on the earth in those days. And oh, by the way, also afterward. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, these were the heroes of old, men of renown. To make things simple, and this is not a simple passage, to sum it up, the word Nephilim means giants. So now it gets more weird. So angels rebel against God because they have sex with human daughters, but they produce these hybrid giants. Okay. So now we just have large offspring. Like these people apparently would have made like great basketball players or something. I don't know. But their name is called the Nephilim, which means the giants. Welcome to Genesis 6. And then they're also described as heroes of old and men of renown. Now that is related to their size, and I don't have time to get into some details, so I'm just gonna give like 30 seconds on it. In the ancient world, in Babylon, we have archaeological evidence that Babylon had these stories, these origin stories, that their civilization, their culture was founded by like 7 divine figures who had lots of wisdom and knowledge and made them and their culture and civilization superior to any other culture, Israel, Egypt, whatever, because they were founded by these gods who gave them special knowledge, and they were called warrior kings because they were big dudes. What's going on here is that Genesis, and we looked at this in the beginning of the series, is doing actually some ancient trash talking. Because Genesis is saying, hey, Babylon, you think your country and civilization and culture is all hot stuff and superior because you had these gods that started it and gave you special knowledge, and these warrior kings, heroes of old, men of renown. Actually, let me tell you who they really are. They're evil angels. Oh, that's what's going on here. Now, that's a lot to unpack. We'll do it on the podcast, but I just wanted to drop that there so that you know that like there's a reason for this. This isn't just random weird stuff. And actually, let me just drop this little nugget here. You know a famous Sunday school lesson? Who's a giant that we learn about often in Sunday school? Goliath. You want to know something that will blow your mind? Goliath is an offspring of the Nephilim. Interesting. Was he an enemy of God and his people? Oh, yeah. Oh, we learn about in Numbers chapter 33 that when Israel is going into the promised land, the land of Canaan, and Joshua sends people in there to see what the land is like, they come back and they give a report, and they say in Numbers 33, oh, we can't go there. Why? There are giants there. Oh, descendants of the Nephilim. Oh, and they're God's enemies. You can actually trace the Nephilim as the enemies of God all throughout the Old Testament. And as we're going to see in a little bit, don't stop there. Just saying, some interesting stuff. So here's where we're at so far. What I'm saying is that the scriptures give us in Genesis 6 a second rebellion story of spiritual beings who rebel against God. And this time, it ain't just one. Genesis 3 is just the serpent, one, the devil. This time, now we're not given a number. We're not saying it's 5 or 5 million. We don't know. It's plural, though. It's a large group that rebel against God. They disobey God's created order, and they fuse together the supernatural and the natural, which leads to human corruption. Great. Mark sounds like some sci-fi story. What is this origin story from 4,000 or 5,000 years ago at minimum, maybe a little bit longer? What in the world does that have to do with us today? And oh, by the way, we're a Christian church. Our mission statement, be with Jesus, become like Jesus, do what Jesus did. We're all about Jesus. What does this have to do with Jesus? Well, it just so happens that in the first century world, in the Jewish first century world of Jesus was Jewish, lived in the first century, and he was a rabbi. He was trained theologically during this time. We have ample historical documents that they believed that demonic spirits traced back their origin to the Nephilim in Genesis 6. This is widespread knowledge. Every scholar would agree with this. The thought is this: these Nephilim, these giant hybrid creatures, they didn't have hybrid cars like we do, but they had hybrid creatures apparently. Half human, half supernatural. They eventually died. Like we actually think maybe Goliath was like the last one and he died. But, and this is what they said, their spirits continue to live on. And sounds strange, but if you think about it, it's actually really logical. If you have a half human, half supernatural being, the human part dies, done. But the angelic supernatural part continues on. But then they're trapped to the earthly realm because God booted them out because of their rebellion. So when the Nephilim die, they're these hybrid offspring creatures. Their physical bodies die, but then their spirit is still going around. They're evil people and they're trapped in the earthly realm. This is literally the logic of first century Jewish people of the origin of demons. What? I know, it's weird, but is it? Let's think about it a little bit more. Jesus shows up in the first century. Who is Jesus going to war with and battling and casting out all over the place? Evil spirits. Interesting. Do you know what demons are called over 20 times in the New Testament? Unclean spirits. Why? Now again, you don't gotta buy this stuff. That's fine if you disagree with me. Seriously, that's okay. Like I'm gonna sleep fine tonight. Maybe I won't after talking about demons for a couple hours. But I think there's a logic to this. At either rate, you got to explain some things about Jesus. Why is Jesus always interacting with demons? Why is he casting them out? Why are they called unclean spirits? Why not just call them evil spirits? I mean, they are called that too. They're all called demons, but they're called unclean spirits over 20 times. Why? You have to answer that. Now, if you have a better answer and a better interpretation, I'm open. Please give it to me. It'd actually make it way easier to preach on this. So it's not like I'm like, man, I can't wait to talk about giant offspring, half angel, half wicked human creatures. Man, the church is gonna love that this morning. So folks, I'm not doing this because it's easy. You guys probably think I'm a psycho or something. Oh, in Jewish law in Leviticus, they had laws about uncleanliness. You know what those laws were? Don't mix things. Animals. I'm making this one up. Don't, mate a cow with a chicken. Now, they actually also had it about like cloth and wool and all these other things. They said that something became unclean when you mixed it, and also don't go near a dead corpse. That is unclean. Interesting. Nephilim, dead corpses that are the result of intermingling human and angels. That is where their spirits come, and they're called unclean spirits. Now, in case I'm cuckoo, here's the New Testament scholar for you, writes this. One of the more puzzling features of early Christian attitudes towards purity is the gospel's frequent reference to spirits as impure. The absence of similar language in Greco-Roman literature up through the 2nd century is striking. Evil spirits proceeded from dead bodies of the fallen giants who were born as a result, and I don't know what this word is, miscegenation, of angels with women. These spirits are called unclean in analogy to the similar classification of unclean animals, an unnatural combination of heavenly and earthly beings. They represent an anomalous mixture of categories. Evil spirits in many Jewish sources ultimately trace their origins to the defining union of these heavenly beings with women. Like unclean animals, these impure spirits represent an anomalous mixture of categories. All of that to say, here's my summary. Genesis 6 is the origin story of supernatural beings who mated with human daughters that produced these hybrid supernatural natural giants called Nephilim, who then eventually ended up dying, but their spirits remained in the earth and still do to this day to war against God's creation and you and I. Might I add one more thing? I think we can understand Matthew chapter 16 now. Let's go to Matthew 16. Here's the geography of Matthew 16. Jesus is in an area called Caesarea Philippi. Well, where is Caesarea Philippi? It's at the foot of a mountain, Mount Hermon. Here's an actual picture of this today. You can go to Caesarea Philippi today at the base of Mount Hermon, and it literally looks just like that. Those are people visiting this archaeological site. Okay, so this is a real place. You go to today, northern Israel. Guess what? In the 1st century, do you know where they believed that the sons of God descended down on earth to mate with these human daughters? Mount Hermon. Okay, so what? Well, you see that cave? It was called the gates of hell. Hades, literally. That's that place. They viewed that place, that cave, there's actually water in there back then, and that was the realm of the dead. Right in the cave and down. This is what they said. This is what they believed. And actually, there's actually stories in the Old Testament of this exact area, of pagan idolatry, sacrifices. A lot of bad, evil stuff happens there. Greece and Rome take over. They actually then build statues of their gods right there. And that's what all those inscriptions are over there. There were pagan gods worshipped there. In other words, Caesarea Philippi at the base of Mount Hood is ground zero of cosmic evil spiritual beings. And everybody knew that in the 1st century. So if you're like, hey, where do evil demons live and where's the realm of dead? They'd be, oh yeah, Caesarea Philippi, base of Mount Hermon, go there. Oh, now we laugh, but check this out. Where does Jesus take his disciples? Boom! Right there, and now what does he have to say? Here we go. Matthew 16:18. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. What's the rock? Well, it's the giant thing that they're standing in front of, Mount Hermon. It was super rocky. Now, if you know your church history, there's the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church, they debate over this passage and they say, well, Peter's the rock. And so, the Pope comes through Peter, and Protestants say, no. I think they're both wrong. What Jesus is saying, he's saying on this rock, he means it physically. Like there's a giant mountain right behind us. That's the rock. And then he says, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. Why is Jesus saying this? Yeah, because they're standing right in front of a cave that was called the gates of Hades, the realm of the dead. And Jesus is saying, I have come down to my Father's creation to overcome and defeat all demonic and evil and unclean spirits that have wreaked evil and havoc on my image bearers. For the longest time, I viewed this passage as saying this: man, the gates of hell are like coming against us, the church, and like we're on defense. We gotta like hold up our shields and our swords and put our helmets on because the gates of hell is coming. No. That's the opposite of what's going on here. Jesus intentionally chooses to take his disciples and us thereby today up to ground zero of demonic, evil, cosmic, literally the gates of hell. Like he takes them. This is the gates of Hades. He walks up to it and says, and on this ground, I will build my church and we will defeat all of them. That is the opposite of playing defense. If you don't know sports, that's called offense. Really, Jesus and the church, us, he's like, you're a sports team and you're going on the offensive. Hell is on the defensive. I mean, how cool is that? Okay, just me thinks it's cool. Man, you guys lost that sleep. The whole point of the life, the ministry, the death and resurrection of Jesus, 1 John 3:8. The reason the Son of God appeared was to destroy the devil's work. That sounds a lot like Matthew 16. Here's another one, Luke 11:20. But if I drive out demons by the finger of God, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. Now, it's so fascinating to me, our cultural moment right now. Because on the one hand, statistically, apparently, people are really open to spirituality. People have no problem dripping in New Age mysticism and Halloween stuff. People are open. And then also, we just read theologically that Jesus came to destroy that stuff. I mean, you put those two things together, people being open to spirituality and Jesus coming to destroy demons. And my reaction logically is like, man, we should be seeing and witnessing and participating in Jesus's victory and freedom and healing from spiritual evil and demons all the time. Like, aren't we living in like a perfect recipe for that, if you will? But I don't see too much victory and freedom and healing. Why? This is the stuff that keeps me up at night. As I've processed this in the last couple of days, I've come up with, at least for me, humbly, my two best reasons for this. One, I think many of us today, and I would say this is mostly true of Christians, which is sad, we are unaware of how demons influence or affect us. We're just unaware of how they gain access at us. And then secondly, I think so many of us have shame to admit that we think we have demonic influence on our life. Meaning this, like we're scared and ashamed to come forward and be like, hey, I think there's like demonic influence on me right now. Like I need help. Would you pray for me? Would you pray for like the freedom and the power of the Holy Spirit to come? I think most of us are scared and ashamed to come forward and say that. Seriously. Now, let me deal with that one first, and then I'll come back to the first point. Charles Kraft, in his book, Defeating Angels, writes this: Jesus never blamed people for having demons. The belief that demonization comes about only through conscious choice is a lie. Isn't that interesting? Jesus never shamed someone for having a demon. So in the kingdom of God, it's not shame on you. As they say, it's shame off of you. Now, I have to be clear here. Yes, sometimes demonic influence does come on you because of conscious, intentional decisions on our part. Absolutely. I'm going to get into that. So I'm not saying that's not true, but what I'm saying is true is that sometimes demonic influence can come on us not from a intentional decision of yours. It could be the result of someone else or whatever thing else, okay? But either way, there is no shame in you letting a fellow Jesus follower know that, hey, I'm feeling attacked and oppressed right now. Would you pray for me? Like, would you help me receive the power and the freedom of Jesus? The purpose of Jesus casting out demons is not a magic show. That's not the point. There are church traditions that have turned it into that, and that's their problem. I've actually seen some demonic activity being cast out in a very normal way. So it doesn't need to be all wacko. And that is because the purpose of Jesus casting out demons is to bring healing and freedom and love. It is a thing done out of and for love. So don't be ashamed. That is a tactic of the enemy. I believe, sadly, that so many people, even in our church, because I know some stories, that you are held in chains and imprisoned by demons because you're scared to come forward to have someone help you in order to experience healing in the name of Jesus. See, light can only overcome darkness if you open the door to let it in. Think about a dark room. Only two ways to get light in: either opening the door and light from outside comes in, or you open shutters and blinds and light comes in. Light only comes in if you open yourself up to have it come in. Don't be ashamed. This is a safe place. I mean, I thought of this. It'd be like if I went to the doctor. No, it'd be like if I had a disease and I didn't go to the doctor because I was scared to tell the doctor that I'm not feeling well. Why would I do that? I go to a doctor to seek relief. And no doctor, or at least a good one, is gonna be like, why did you come to me with all these migraine headaches? Get out of here. No, they say, well, tell me more and let's see if we can figure out a remedy for it. But that's what so many of us do with the demonic. We're scared to go to the doctor. But man, he's a good physician. And he loves you. Back to the first point. I don't think many of us are aware of how demonic activity starts. For lack of a better term, an entry point or like access to us. I've always found helpful this analogy from Charles Kraft. He says demons are like rats, and rats are attracted to garbage. How do rats get to garbage? Well, first of all, they're looking for it. They can smell it. I know, kind of a grotesque metaphor. But rats, they can smell garbage from far away and they find it and they look for it. Garbage attracts rats. So the question is there garbage in your life? Because where there's garbage, there may be an opening for demonic activity. Not always. Not always. I'm just saying that could be. I have garbage in my garage and we don't have a rat problem. So I'm not saying always. But there have been times where we do leave garbage out and rats do come. So what's the garbage? This is very important. I feel compelled to share this. Let's put this up. I want you to ask yourself, do you have this garbage in your life? First one, occultism. What do I mean by that? Satanic rituals, tarot cards, palm reading, Ouija boards, and then here are the last two that I think are actually quite popular, and it's the New Age movement. Astrology and horoscopes. I am shocked at the amount of Christians I see on social media posting stuff about horoscopes. Now, I think a lot of it's just out of naivety. But can I just tell you, don't flirt with that stuff. Seriously. And I don't mean that in kind of like an alarmist, like legalistic way. It's just got pagan background stuff. And I think that's garbage for demons. Just get it out. You want to know about the future of your life? Get on your knees and pray to Jesus. He controls your future. Second thing, false religions. Paul tells us very clearly, 1 Corinthians 10, context is sacrifices to pagan gods. If you participate in the worship of pagan gods, you're actually opening yourself up to the demonic. Next two, habitual sin. Here's what I mean by that. Addictions like, of course, alcoholism, drugs, pornography, but I also want to name some others. How about greed? How about gluttony? Those are habitual, sinful addictions. Paul calls those in Ephesians 4:27 footholds. You are opening yourself up for possible demonic attack when you are in a habitual addiction, sinful like patterns. And then the last one, generational curses. I didn't used to believe in this one, and then a guy that I look up to and that I've learned a lot from, he didn't either, until they realized after decades of his wife having chronic disease, oh my gosh, there's been a generational curse put upon her from 3 grandmothers up somewhere in South America. She went and had the demon cast out, all gone, completely healed to this day. And then you go back and read the Old Testament. Oh, yeah. There's lots of generational curses there. Here's my question for you. Are you struggling with any of these things? Do you have any of this garbage in your life? I told at 9 a.m. this, even if there's one person in here that has this, it's all worth it. Because Jesus has come announcing his kingdom to bring you freedom. And of course, there are wrong, sinful things in our heart that emerge all the time. But there are also pressures from outside of us that war against us. And I actually think most of us have felt that. Like, do you know it? Do you feel that? Do you sense that for yourself? We are responsible. Our decisions have consequences, absolutely. But then sometimes we also do things that we don't really wish to do. And it's because it almost feels like we've lost control and something else like this, we call it like an outside force, is controlling us. And it has a hold on you, a stronghold, a foothold. There could be a reason for that. As bizarre as it sounds, that could be traced back to Genesis 6. But what's way more important than that is something like Matthew 16, where Jesus says, I will build my church on ground zero of demonic evil, and I will overcome it. That is the God we serve. I want to invite up the worship team. Also want to invite up the prayer team on both sides, man. If there's ever a time for a prayer response time, I mean, it's this. So we're going to sing 3 songs of worship. But there's just no way that there aren't any of us in here who aren't chained to something. And man, the message is not shame on you, it's shame off you. Because there are these strange creatures out who are bent on destroying you. But praise God, there is one who's bent is to destroy them and free you. And we have the opportunity to open ourselves up to this Jesus of Nazareth. To what he did 2,000 years ago, he does today. It's just, are you open? Will you go to the doctor? Or do you stay home chronically ill? I know the Father's heart. He's the great physician. He doesn't want you just to believe in him. He wants you to engage and experience his power and his love and his freedom. Oh, that we would be a church that leans into that. So if any of that resonates with you, just come forward and let these people pray for you. It's the least we can do. Would you stand? Father, Son, and Spirit, we come as people who are in war, whether we know it or not. You say, Jesus, that our battle is not against flesh and blood, but it's against the authorities, the principalities of the air. And Jesus, we come, we want to wage war. We want to be on the offensive, not the defensive, Jesus. May your blood be poured out on this group of people, Lord, and we pray for chains to come down, breakthroughs to be crushed. We want freedom in this, and freedom reign in this place. Holy Spirit, come and minister to the brokenhearted, the oppressed. Breathe fresh wind. Only by the Spirit of God. But if I, by the Spirit of God, cast out this demon, then the kingdom of God has come upon you. May that be done today.